I heard some people singing along. That was awesome. I think it was a couple weeks ago, I was talking about Benaiah, who was the head bodyguard for King David. He's the guy that chased the lion into a pit and killed him with a spear. And I just love those kinds of stories. You know, I'm a guy, so I like all the, you know, we would live in our culture and we would think that to be a Christian, to be a man of God, we might think that, you know, you have to be kind of soft. You know, you have to be, and gentleness is part of it, and, you know, we want to be kind, and that's all true, but, you know, the whole other part of being a guy, being a man of God, the whole warrior, right? Because Benaiah was a warrior. David was a warrior. God has created that in us. And, you know, God is not some puppy dog that sits up in heaven and waits for our requests. Right? God is a God who smited thousands, tens of thousands of warriors with a single word. God is powerful. God is awesome. God is almighty. God deserves our respect. Right? We're bikers, we understand respect, right? God deserves our respect. So Benaiah was this guy, if you weren't here, that, you know, he's being stalked by a lion, and instead of running from the lion, 500-pound beast, he chases this lion, right? So how crazy is that? Of course the lion runs because he knows the guy's crazy, right? He's supposed to be running that way. He's running this way, right? He's got a spear in his hand and all that. So the lion runs, falls into the pit, and instead of going, well, you know, the lion's in the pit, I'm safe, I can leave. Not Benaiah, man. He says, no, I'm going to jump into the pit with my spear, and I'm going to do away with this lion. And he does. And he likes that. See, it's a boy. Right? We're put together that way. So, you know, and, you know, where does that come from? You know, where does that courage, where does that audacity to say, man, not only am I not going to run from that lion, I'm going to chase that lion. And man, when that lion thinks he's gotten away, I ain't done. I'm going to jump in the pit with him, and I'm going to do away with him. And even to think that, but then to actually do it, you know. But this is a man of God, right? And men of God in the Bible, they know God is with them, right? So for one thing, we know that when we die, we'll be with God. So that fear of death is not as strong. It's not as much of a worry for us because, you know, we know where we're going. We know who we're going to be with. We know what eternity looks like for us. So we're going to something better. So that, you know, that's one part of it. But we also know that this God, who is almighty, who is all powerful, who is the Lord of Lords and the King of heaven and earth and all the universe, is with us. So it gives us not only the confidence, but the audacity to think we can do something that no one would ever think of doing. And King David, he was one of these kinds of guys, but I'm going to tell you the story, kind of his beginning, the first part of his story, how it all started. And I'm going to read some of this. I had the whole thing out, but I don't know that I'm going to read the whole thing, because I don't know if you all want to hear me read for a half hour. Unless you want to hear me read for a half hour. Okay, thanks. I got a quick no over here. The Lord said to Samuel, This is from 1 Samuel 16, 1 through 13. I'll read part of this, but man, go back and read the story. Hey, you got homework now. Go back and read the story. Go into 1 Samuel 16, 1 through 13, and read this. The Lord said to Samuel, "How long will you mourn for Saul, since I have rejected him as king over Israel?" So Saul's on his way out. And the Lord's already telling, Samuel's a prophet, right? So the Lord's kind of telling him what's going to happen here. And he says, "Fill your horn with oil and be on your way. I am sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem. I have chosen one of his sons to be king." So Jesse's got 8 sons, and Samuel is this prophet, and he says, hey, Saul's on his way out, and I'm going to tell you who the next king's going to be. I want you to go see this guy. He's got 8 sons. When you get there, I'll reveal the one to you that is going to be king. And Samuel says, well, how can I go if Saul hears about this? If the king hears about this, he will kill me. The Lord said, take a heifer with you and say, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what to do. You are to anoint for me the one that I indicate. So basically, as God says many times, Samuel says, well, how am I going to do this? You know, this guy will kill me. And God says, well, I'll be with you. And he says, here's what you do. You go and you say, hey, I'm the religious guy that's going to sacrifice the calf here. And, you know, Saul's not going to kill the religious guy that's there to do the calf, right? So he shows up, and I'll just tell you what happens. So Jesse has 8 sons, 7 of which are there. And as Samuel starts to look these guys over, he gets to the first guy, and this guy, he's a big guy, large in stature, muscular, good-looking guy. You know, and Jesse's thinking, yeah, he's got to be the guy, you know, that they're going to choose for king. And Samuel looks at him, and God says, not the one. And he goes through all the rest of the other 6 with similar circumstances, you know, because Jesse's going, well, if he ain't him, maybe it's this one. And they go all the way through, and Samuel says, no. Do you have any other sons? Because I ain't seeing the one that God is going to indicate here. And Jesse says, well, yeah, I got a son, a younger son, and he's off tending sheep. You know, he's kind of the smaller, less ominous kind of guy, and he's off tending sheep, because that's what you do with the young one. You know, the rest of them are out fighting battles and building and whatever. You go tend to sheep. And Jesse doesn't think in a million years that's the guy, but Samuel says, that's him, let me see him. And he sees him, and he says, you know, he's a healthful, handsome kid, because he's basically a kid. You know how we see, you know, well, I'll say how I see, you know, a 20, 25-year-old. He's a man, but to me he's a kid, right? He looks like a kid. And Samuel says to his surprise, that's him. That's our guy. And it's cool how God will, you know, he'll pick that person because it glorifies God. You know, if it was the biggest, strongest, the guy was 8 foot tall and, you know, full of muscles, and God just created this fighting machine, you'd say, yeah, well, sure, that's the guy, right? But when you pick David and he says, this guy's going to be king, everybody says, well, I mean, if this guy's going to be king, then you really are God, right? Because this ain't the guy we would pick, right? So if this broken down preacher is going to be the preacher of your biker church, there's got to be a God.
No doubt.
No doubt. Thank you. So that's what, you know, that's the way God works. It works. He works to show us His glory. When He chooses a man or woman of God to do something, he equips them, and in their success, in the way that they build the kingdom, we can clearly see that God is at work. There were so many things that have happened just in our short history of the church that are undeniable. God just put things into place that were not planned by man, but he had a plan all along. So David really wasn't even on the radar of the 8 sons, but that was his guy. Excuse me. Because God says, do not look on the outside, because God can see a man's heart. Or in other words, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, but it's the size of the fight in the dog. Right? And God can see that. Not only can God see that, God made that. Right? So he knows. You know, and we wander around trying to figure out this life and what we're going to do in it. And, you know, often we don't want to hear from God, don't want to hear about God. But God is the author, right? God is the creator. And if we really want to know and we really want to understand why we're here and what our purpose is, we got to listen to the one that purposed it. And as long as we, you know, I said to somebody the other day, because God says it to me all the time, just listen. Right? How many times do we go to God and we want to talk to God and we want to complain to God or even thank God or whatever, but we want to talk. We need to listen. Because God's got something to say to us. He's got a direction for every one of us. And it's way better than what we think it is, right? Here's a kid that was tending sheep, but God had a plan for him, right? And later on, God calls David a man after his own heart. And you'll find out very soon as I'm going through this why that is. But God, even though for David, for all his flaws, and he had a lot of them, if you read the story, man, you might say you did some things. You didn't do anything that David didn't do. But in the end, God says, this is a man after my own heart. Because David loved, in the end, always loved and trusted God. He always repented, always went back to the God that created him. So we can sit here with all of our stories, and we have them. And we can think, man, you know, how can God use us? Or I could never do that. And, you know, and you're right. Outside of Jesus Christ, you can't do it on your own. But with God, you could do things that you can't even imagine you could do. Those little dreams that you have, God says, yeah, that's nothing. Wait till you see what really happens. Just start moving in that direction. Start moving and knowing, because that's what David does. So let's go on with the story. So later on in the beginning of David's career as the potential king, there's this large battle brewing, and there's this giant named Goliath, and he's with the Palestine army that the Israels are getting ready to line up against. And you know, he's just this huge, scary, ominous, you know, he's that big biker bouncer dude you see when you walk in, and you know, he's muscular and no hair and a goatee, and he looks like he can't wait to punch somebody, right? And you don't want to mess with that guy, right? You don't want to mess with that guy. When he tells you cut it out, you should cut it out, because if not, you get what you deserve, right? So Goliath, he stood. So Goliath, this is 1 Samuel 17, 8 through 11. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Palestine, and are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down here. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Then the Palestinians said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." On hearing the Palestinians' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. So here's this big, angry warrior, and he decides, I don't want to have this whole big battle. I don't want to kill all these people that I can enslave, right? I just want to call out their biggest, baddest dude, and I want to show them how bad I am. And he defies them, and he's talking trash, right? That's what we would call it. He's saying, you guys don't have anybody that can defeat me. And there's probably nobody in his own army that thinks they can defeat him, so that's why they're allowing him to go out there and run his mouth, right? They figure he could back it up. Every day for 40 days, Goliath makes this challenge. Comes out every day and makes this same challenge. So, King Saul, he gets kind of tired of hearing it, and he says, I'm going to make an offer. Right, so in 1 Samuel 17:25, now the Israelites have been saying, "Do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him." That's pretty cool. But then he adds this, so he's serious. And he's tired of hearing it, right? Because he says, he will also give him his daughter in marriage and will exempt his family from taxes to Israel. Wow. Wouldn't that be cool if somebody said, hey, you can live tax-free for the rest of your life? I think that's the one that really sells it, right? I mean, hey, I'll give you great wealth, and hey, man, I'll give you my daughter, but no taxes. You'd be like, yeah, sign me up for that. You have me at no taxes. So he makes this great offer because he's getting tired of hearing Goliath every morning getting out and challenging his army. David comes to the battleground, and 3 of his brothers are there because they're warriors. David's still tending sheep, but he comes to see what's going on. And David's kind of like, he gets kind of miffed about all this. And he says, why are we letting this guy come out and talk bad about God? Why are we letting this guy come out and humiliate us this way? We have God. And he's still this little guy, and his brother kind of gets mad at him and says, well, you're just here because you're all full of yourself and you think you're all that, but really you're just here to watch. You're not really here to do anything. So David makes an argument to Saul, because Saul doesn't think he's the guy, right? Because he says, hey, I'll go out and kill this guy. And Saul's like, yeah, right. Yeah, you're not really looking like my champion there. But David says to Saul, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. Saul replied, you are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth. But David said to Saul, your servant meaning himself, has been keeping his father's sheep, and when a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it. I struck it down and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion, that sounds familiar, right, and the bear. Then he goes on to say, this uncircumcised Philistine, he called him a name there. Did you catch that? He's talking trash now too. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them. In other words, the lion, the bear, now I'm going to add the Philistine to the list. He'll be like one of them because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of the Philistine. That same God that had me strike down that lion and strike down, and see what David does here? He doesn't say, I'm a great and mighty warrior. I've been a warrior since I was a kid. No, he says, God's with me. And that same God that allowed me to strike down that lion and that helped me to strike down that bear is also going to help me strike down this Philistine that thinks he's all that. So what's Saul got to say? Saul said to David, go and the Lord be with you. Can't argue with that. Hey man, if you want to go, go. What's he care? So David's getting ready to go, and the king gives him his armor. This is the funny part of this story. He gives him his armor, and then back then, you had this armor, and it weighed well over 100 pounds. And, I don't know how much David weighed, but they keep calling him young and healthful and handsome, so it sounds like he's young. Maybe he's a little over 100 pounds himself, who knows? But they put this armor on him, and he can hardly lift his arms or move around. And he said, this is no good. Yeah, I can't do that. I'm just going to go out as I am. And so he goes down to the river and finds 5 smooth stones. Maybe he showed a little bit of lack of faith there, because maybe if he was real confident, he would only grab 1 stone. Right, but he grabbed 5 because he figured, well, who knows, I might miss. I don't know. And he goes out there to fight this giant, this huge guy in armor with whatever weapons they have at that time. And he's got nothing but a sling and a pouch full of stones, in his shepherd's cloak. So here's this little guy going out, stepping out there to fight this giant. So in 1 Samuel 17:32-37, it says, meanwhile, the Philistine with his shield bearer in front of him kept coming closer to David. So here's this guy, not only is he big, he's got armor, he's got a guy carrying some of his stuff. He's got so much stuff with him. And he looks at David, and what do you think he thinks when he looks at David? He laughs, right? That's what I would do. He looked at David and saw him was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, am I a dog that you come at me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Come here, he said, and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals. Right, so he comes up, he sees this kid, he probably giggles a little bit, and then he gets mad, because he's just like, this is who they sent to fight me, this great warrior. And then he starts talking trash again. David says to the Philistine, this is 1 Samuel 17:45-47. David said to the Philistine, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. And those gathered here will know that it is not by the sword or spear that the Lord saves for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all into our hands. So David has the answer. And the answer is, I have God. And you have all your spears and you have all your weapons, but I have God. And here's what's going to happen to you. You think you're going to kill me and feed me to the birds. I'm going to cut off your head and feed all your buddies to the birds. Right? Because God is with me. And remember that. Like, everything that David says, he backs up with God. Everything David said is about God is with me. It ain't about him or the Israeli army. It's about God. God is with us. And you've defied God. And now God's going to show you, because he's going to take this little skinny kid and he's going to kill you and cut your head off. So what happens? Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and he struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead and he fell face down on the ground. Boy, can you imagine the scene there? They're all watching, everybody's on each side, going out there laughing at this kid, and he throws a rock at this guy and kills him. Face down, boom. That's it, end of fight. That must have been awesome. That's like something you'd see on YouTube, right? He'd laugh about it. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, without a sword in his hand, and he struck down the Philistine and killed him. David ran and stood over him. He took hold of the Philistine's sword, because he didn't even have a sword when he made this threat. That's funny too. And he drew it from the sheath. After he killed him, he cut off his head with the sword, just like he promised. When the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, what'd they do, guys? They turned and ran, right? You better believe they did. That's just funny. But this is, so gentle, kind, loving God, yes. Mighty, powerful warrior, standing over this giant of a guy, as insensitive as it may sound, cutting off his head, just to say, this is our God. You think you're something? This is my God. This is what he can do. And we still have that power today, right? Maybe we're not battling on the battleground literally, but there's always a spiritual warfare going on. And there's still men of God, men and women of God, who are triumphing over what we think is the status quo. So I was reading a sports article the other day, and I came across this article about Tim Tebow. And you guys probably all know, y'all probably know who Tim Tebow is. But it's by this guy from SB Nation. His name's James Dater, and I'm just going to read it. It says, hate on Tim Tebow all you want, but there's no denying he's one of the most motivational guys in sports. Now, just like to preempt this a little bit, what this article comes out of is so Tebow, he tried his hand at the NFL, and I thought he had some success, but, he didn't end up as a starting quarterback anywhere. And he went on, he was commentating for college games. Then he decided to try his hand at baseball. So he's on this Arizona league that he made, and it's for people that are prospects for the Major League Baseball or whatever. And he's being criticized, because it's a publicity stunt and it's all this and that, and why are you doing this? Why don't you just give up? Why don't you just why don't you just accept that you're never going to be able to play sports or whatever you want to do? So this guy says, you can hate on Tim all you want, but there's no denying he's one of the most motivational guys in sports, period. On Tuesday, he appeared with Stephen A. Smith on First Take and dropped the best speech you will hear all week. When he was criticized for taking a long shot at making an MLB roster, Tim dropped a hammer. Well, it's fine, this is what Tim said. Well, it's fine if they look at me and say, that's what I should be doing, but they're not me. And when dreams are based on and when are dreams ever based on chances? Dreams are based on something that's in your heart, that are passions, that are something you want to try, not on chances. I mean, I'm grateful that I get to go pursue something, even if it's a long shot, versus something that, yeah, I might be able to do and do pretty well. But it's not in my heart. So why am I going to do that? You know, I think that there's something unfortunate in society is a lot of people just go to do what they feel they should do and live with the status quo and go live by all these rules and, hey, this is going to be okay. You know, just go accept your average 9 to 5 rather than striving for something, because the ultimate goal isn't to succeed or fail. The ultimate goal is to give it everything you have. Sorry, I lost my space. Okay, so let me start. Hey, so it's going to be okay, you know, just go accept your average 9 to 5 rather than striving for something, because the ultimate goal isn't to succeed or fail. The ultimate goal is to give it everything you have for something that's on your heart and a dream, and pursuing that. And if you get to live out your dream every single day, then the result doesn't matter. I can look back 20, 30 years from now and be able to look at this time and say, you know what? I gave it everything. I gave everything I had to football, I gave everything I had to baseball, and I was able to live out some of my dreams. And in my opinion, that's pretty awesome. Nobody had a single thing to say after this. TiVo said everything that needed to be said and more. And this should be mandatory viewing for everyone in college. Great article, right? Awesome commentary on Tim and his attitude and all the great things that he's accomplished, even in some of the failures that he's had to live through. Right? How many of us can say we want a playoff game? You know, you can talk about his skills all you want. How many people can say we even tried out for an MLB team, a Major League Baseball team, right? But he was able to do so just because he went for it. But what they don't tell you, and this is, I'm sure this was part of the conversation, because I've heard Tim talk before, and Tim always talks about the Lord, because Tim is a devout Christian. And I'm sure the part that they don't tell you here is Tim goes after these dreams because God is with him and God inspires him. And he's known about all these men of God and women of God from back in old and right here and now that have done incredible things because they had the courage to step forward. But they had that courage because they knew God was with them. Right? So Tim is not only living out some of his dreams, but he's glorifying the God that he serves. Because when the whole world says, Tim, why are you doing this? Tim has an answer. Right? Our answer is Jesus. If you don't know Jesus as your Lord and Savior, this is your day of salvation. No doubt? All you have to do is admit that I'm a sinner. It's not hard for me to admit. I mess up. I don't always do the right thing. And I know that that separates me from God. But I also know that Jesus died on the cross to pay for all that. He spilled his blood. He gave his life. He took all that pain and suffering for us so that we can be cleansed of our sin and we can now be with God, and God will be with us. And when God is with us, then we can start living out our dreams. Right? Then we start dreaming dreams, and we don't just dream dreams, we live dreams. And I'm here to testify I'm one of those people living the dream that God has given me. And you guys can be those people too. This is your day. So before you leave here, see somebody, pray with somebody, tell Jesus, accept Jesus into your heart, and know freedom. Know freedom today. Amen. Okay. Hey, Brad's going to do another song for us. I'm going to pray for us, and Brad's going to do another song, and then you guys are free to hang out as long as you want. Bow with me. Lord Jesus, thank you for your word. Thank you for your word today. Thank you for being with us. Lord, thank you for loving us so much that you wouldn't leave us alone. Thank you for loving us so much that you give us the power and the strength and the courage to defeat our own lions, Lord. To defeat those things in our life that would keep us from being the men and women that you have purposed us to be, Lord. Help us to listen to you, to hear that purpose. Help us to dream those dreams, and help us to make those dreams come true. We pray this in your precious name, Lord Jesus. And everyone said, no doubt.